Welcome to another deep dive. I'm always super excited to dig into these fascinating concepts with you, and today is no different. We're going to be talking about this idea of an age of mentality.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely quite a concept.
It really is, and I think it's something that we can all benefit from learning a little bit more about.
Yeah.
So we're going to be taking a look at a blog post written by John Head,
Oh, okay.
and he has a whole website dedicated to this age of mentality idea. So we'll link that in the show notes, but I think it's worth exploring what exactly this means and how it relates to our lives.
Well, and I think the idea of a new age always captures people's attention.
It does.
There was the age of Aquarius, right? And we talk about the, Stone Age, the Bronze Age, so there's always this fascination with what is the next age that we're moving into. And I think what's really interesting about this particular concept of the age of mentality is it suggests that we're in a period where our mental and emotional abilities are really going to be the key to unlocking not just personal potential, but also creating positive change on a larger scale.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not just about us as individuals, but it's also about how we impact the world around us.
And I think that's really what's capturing people's attention.
Absolutely. And one of the things that John Head talks about in his blog post that really resonated with me is this idea of emotional alchemy.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
Well, it sounds kind of like turning lead into gold. The old alchemists were trying to...
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about it, because he's essentially saying that we can take those negative experiences, those negative emotions we all have, and we can actually transform them into something positive and productive.
So you're talking like, taking a really bad experience and somehow finding the good in it, or spinning it to, something that helps you grow.
Right.
Makes you a better person.
Yeah, it's about changing our perspective on these negative experiences. Right. But also it's about this deeper process of transformation.
Okay.
And I think the word alchemy is really powerful because it suggests that there's a process involved. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to think positive thoughts and everything will be fine.
Right. It's not about denial.
It's not about denial.
It's
about taking those raw materials, those negative experiences, and actually working with them to create something new and beautiful.
Right, and I think a lot of people can relate to that because we've all had experiences in our lives that have been really challenging or really difficult. And, sometimes we can get stuck in those experiences and let them define us.
Absolutely.
But what if we could actually use those experiences as fuel for growth, as opportunities to become more resilient, more compassionate, more wise?
And that's what I find so exciting about this concept of emotional alchemy. It's like we're being given a new set of tools to work with, to navigate life's challenges in a more empowered and purposeful way.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I think it's really appealing to people who are maybe feeling a little bit stuck or feeling like they're, victims of circumstance, because it says you have the power to change your experience.
So let's break down this emotional alchemy process a little bit. How does this actually work?
Yeah.
I mean, can we really just flip a switch and turn negativity into something good?
Well, if it were that easy, we'd all be doing it, right?
Right.
But I think one of the key principles that Head emphasizes in his blog post is the idea of truth. And he talks about this idea of vaccinating ourselves against lies and deceit, which is a really powerful metaphor.
Oh, it's a really interesting metaphor.
Yeah.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think he's talking about building up a kind of immunity to negativity by really focusing on what's true and what's authentic and, discerning between what's real and what's just, a story we're telling ourselves.
Yeah, right. So it's not about ignoring the negative, but it's about seeing it through the lens of truth.
Yeah, I like that, seeing it through the lens of truth.
Yeah.
Because so often, we get caught up in our own interpretations and our own stories about what's happening, and those stories may not actually be true.
Yeah, and I think this is where the idea of mindfulness comes in. Becoming more aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions without judgment. And then from that place of awareness, we can start to question those stories and see if they're actually serving us.
Yeah, it's about becoming more discerning, right?
Yeah.
And questioning our assumptions and really looking at the situation objectively.
So instead of getting swept away by those negative emotions, we pause, we take a breath, we check the facts, and then we choose how we want to respond.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really empowering.
It is incredibly empowering because it's saying we're not victims. We have agency, we have choice.
Right. And so much of what we experience in life is really determined by our perception of it.
Right.
The same event can happen to two different people, and they can have completely different experiences of it.
Absolutely.
Based on their mindset, based on their beliefs, based on their past experiences. So if we can start to shift our perception, if we can start to see things through a different lens, then we can actually change our experience of reality.
That is powerful. And I think it really speaks to this idea that the age of mentality is about taking control of our minds.
Yes.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, and that those choices have a direct impact on our experience of life.
Absolutely. I'm really resonating with this idea of emotional alchemy. And, I'm wondering, as we move into this age of mentality, what are some of the things that are holding us back from fully embracing this new way of being?
Well, that's a great question. And I think there are probably a lot of factors at play.
Right.
But one thing that comes to mind is that we live in a culture that often glorifies negativity.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're bombarded with negative news stories, negative social media posts, negative conversations, and it can be really easy to get sucked into that vortex of negativity.
Yeah, and I think that negativity can be addictive.
It can.
It can create a kind of drama in our lives that keeps us feeling, engaged, even if it's in a negative way.
Right, so part of this shift to the age of mentality is about becoming more conscious of the information we're consuming.
Yes.
The conversations we're engaging in, the environments we're surrounding ourselves with, and making choices that support our mental and emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And it's not about just avoiding negativity altogether. I mean, negativity is a part of life. It's a part of the human experience, but it's about how we relate to that negativity, how we process it, how we transform it.
And I think one of the things that John Head emphasizes in his blog post is the importance of connecting with others who share a belief in truth and honesty. And he talks about this idea of creating a sort of a global network for positive change.
I like that.
And he actually believes connecting purely on a mental level is crucial, which is why he doesn't ask for any personal information on his website.
He doesn't ask for any personal information, so it's completely anonymous.
Completely anonymous.
So he's suggesting that the anonymity enhances the connection somehow.
It seems that way.
I find that a little counterintuitive. Wouldn't knowing more about the people you're connecting with help you feel more connected?
That's what I would think. But maybe there's something to this idea of connecting on a purely mental level.
Yeah, certainly intriguing.
Maybe it allows for a deeper level of authenticity or vulnerability.
It's definitely something to think about.
But let's get back to this idea of converting negative energy into something positive.
Okay.
What are some of the internal shifts that we need to make in order to do that?
One of the key things is developing resilience, which is that ability to bounce back from setbacks and challenges. And, there's a lot of research that supports the effectiveness of techniques like developing a growth mindset, practicing self-compassion, becoming more flexible in our thinking.
So it's about shifting our mindset from one of seeing challenges as failures to seeing them as opportunities for growth.
Exactly.
And it's about treating ourselves with kindness and understanding instead of beating ourselves up for mistakes.
Why you getting mad? Why you getting mad? Why you getting mad? Why you getting mad? Is it a chain? Is it garage opener? Trying to revive, roping us. Trying to define, woken us. Whoa, say whoa. Focus. Stay woke. Stay woke. Focus. Why you getting mad?
Now back to our regularly scheduled programming of the Age of Mentality. Thanks to our host for walking us through this very prolific information. Stay tuned to what's next. Bye!
And I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially in today's world where there's so much pressure to be perfect,
Absolutely.
to succeed, to have it all together.
But the reality is we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have setbacks. And it's how we respond to those setbacks that really determines our success in life.
And I think that's where the age of mentality comes in. It's about recognizing that challenges are inevitable,
Yeah.
but suffering is optional.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, so we can choose to see those challenges as opportunities for growth, or we can choose to see them as reasons to give up.
And that choice is what defines this new era.
It really does.
It's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and our own well-being.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that we have the power to change our experience of the world.
So how do we cultivate that resilience?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques and practices that can help, and we'll be exploring some of those in more detail in later episodes.
Awesome.
But one of the most important things is to start by becoming aware of our thoughts,
Okay.
because our thoughts create our reality.
So if we're constantly thinking negative thoughts, then we're going to experience a negative reality.
Exactly.
But if we can start to cultivate more positive thoughts, more loving thoughts, more compassionate thoughts,
Yeah.
then we'll start to see the world through a different lens.
Right. And that's not to say that we should just ignore the negative or pretend that everything is perfect.
Right.
But it's about choosing to focus on the good,
Mm.
choosing to see the opportunity in every challenge.
And that's where the alchemy comes in. It's about transforming that negativity into something positive,
Yeah.
something that can fuel our growth and our evolution.
I love that, and I think it's really inspiring because it suggests that we have more control over our lives than we often realize.
Absolutely. And it's about time we start claiming that power.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of the specific techniques that we can use to cultivate this resilience and this positive mindset.
Okay, right.
One technique that comes to mind is cognitive reframing,
Okay.
which is essentially the process of changing our perspective on a situation.
So you're talking about like if you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting all stressed out,
Yeah,
you look at it as an opportunity to listen to a podcast or
Exactly.
catch up on your phone call.
yeah. Or, if you get laid off from your job, instead of seeing it as a failure,
Right.
you see it as an opportunity to pursue a new career path that you're more passionate about.
Right. Or to start your own business.
Exactly. So it's about finding the opportunity in the challenge.
And it's about shifting our focus from what we've lost to what we can gain.
Yeah, and this can be a really powerful tool for transforming negativity.
Right.
Because it allows us to see things in a new light
Right. It's like putting on a different pair of glasses.
and seeing the world through a different lens.
Exactly.
And another technique that can be really helpful is mindfulness meditation.
Oh, yeah. I love mindfulness.
Me too.
It's so helpful.
It's such a powerful practice. And it's essentially about becoming more aware of our thoughts and emotions without judgment.
And that's the key, isn't it? The non-judgment part.
It is, because
Yeah.
we tend to judge our thoughts and emotions all the time,
Yeah, like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Or,
Right,
this is a bad thought.
Exactly. And that judgment just creates more suffering.
Right. It just amplifies the negativity.
But when we can just observe those thoughts and emotions without judgment,
Yeah.
we create space for them to pass through us without getting stuck.
Yeah. I like the idea of creating space
Yeah.
for those thoughts and emotions to just kind of flow through.
And that's where the healing begins.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in that space of non-judgmental awareness.
And mindfulness can be really helpful for developing resilience because it helps us to become less reactive to our thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. So instead of getting caught up in that emotional roller coaster,
Right.
we can just observe it from a place of stillness and peace.
Right. And then we can choose how we want to respond.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's about choice.
It is.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our response to any given situation.
Absolutely. And that's what's so empowering about the age of mentality.
It is. It's about recognizing that we are not victims of our circumstances.
Right.
We are creators of our own reality.
Yeah. And I think as we move further into this age, we're going to see more and more people awakening to this truth
I hope so.
and claiming their power.
I think it's already happening.
I think you're right.
I think there's a growing movement of people who are tired of the old ways of being, or tired of the negativity and the drama and the suffering.
Yeah, they're ready for something new.
They're ready for a new way of living, a new way of relating to themselves, to each other, to the world.
And I think the age of mentality offers a path forward.
I agree, and I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Me too.
One thing that we haven't really talked about yet, but that I think is really important, is the role of our environment in cultivating this positive mindset.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Our
Yeah.
environment has a huge impact on our thoughts.
Right.
our emotions, our behavior.
It's true. They say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. And it's not just the people we surround ourselves with, it's also the physical spaces,
Right.
the information we consume, the activities we engage in.
Absolutely.
All of these things contribute to our overall well-being.
Yeah, and I think Head actually talks about this in his blog post. He suggests finding a peaceful, comfortable space for introspection and for processing our emotions.
It's like creating a sanctuary.
Yeah.
A sanctuary for emotional alchemy.
I love that.
A space where we can feel safe and supported as we do this inner work.
And I think it's so important to have that space because this work can be challenging.
It
It can be confronting.
Yeah.
We're dealing with our shadows.
Right. We're dealing with the parts of ourselves that we've been hiding from.
Yeah, and it can be scary to face those parts.
But it's also incredibly liberating
It is.
when we can finally bring those shadows into the light.
Yes, and integrate them into our wholeness.
And that's where the real transformation happens.
Absolutely.
It's not about getting rid of the negative. It's about embracing it, integrating it, and transforming it.
Right, and I think that's what's so beautiful about this concept of emotional alchemy.
Yeah.
It's not about denying any part of ourselves. It's about embracing all of who we are.
The light and the shadow.
Yes.
And that's how we become whole.
And that's how we create a world that is whole.
I love that. So as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about Head's grandfather, Papa Josh.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned him earlier.
I did. And I'm curious to hear more about his story because I think it offers a really powerful illustration of the consequences of not having these tools
Right.
for emotional alchemy.
Yeah, I think his story is really relevant to this conversation.
Tell me about it.
Well, Papa Josh's story is one of incredible resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship.
Okay.
As a young boy enslaved in the South, he endured horrific abuse.
Yeah.
At just 14 years old, he was whipped so brutally.
That's awful.
I know, it's hard to even imagine that he lost all feeling in his skin.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And, Head reflects on how that pain, if he had the tools for emotional alchemy,
Yeah.
could have been channeled into a force for liberation.
So instead of just enduring the pain,
Yeah.
he could have used it as fuel for positive change.
Right.
Not just for himself, but for others as well.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, what if we could all learn to do that? What if we could take our pain, our anger, our frustration, and turn it into something that could heal ourselves and the world around us?
That's a powerful question. And it brings us to the heart of what we're talking about today.
It does.
How do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we take those raw negative emotions and transform them into something positive and productive?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
It is. And I think we're going to be exploring that question in more detail
Okay.
throughout this deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
But before we jump into those specifics, I think it's helpful to look at some ancient wisdom that aligns with these principles of emotional alchemy.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Have you ever heard of the 42 Laws of Ma'at?
The 42 Laws of No, I'm not familiar with those. What are they? They're an ancient Egyptian system that outlines principles for living a just and harmonious life. And what's fascinating is how many of these laws resonate with the ideas that Head presents in his blog posts.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's like this ancient wisdom is being reflected
Yeah.
in this modern concept.
Exactly. It's like these principles are timeless.
They are.
They transcend time and culture.
Absolutely. So can you give us some examples of these laws and how they relate to the age of mentality?
Sure. One of the laws states, I have not committed a sin.
Okay.
Now, this might sound a bit religious at first,
Yeah.
but if we look deeper, it speaks to the importance of taking responsibility for our actions.
So instead of blaming others or external circumstances, we acknowledge our role in creating our reality.
Exactly. It's about owning our choices and understanding that we have the power to create the life we want.
And that aligns with Head's idea of trespassing against no one,
Right.
which we'll discuss in more detail later.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of, not infringing on the rights or the well-being of others.
And it's about respecting ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
Not trespassing against our own values, our own integrity.
So it's a holistic concept.
Yeah.
It's about honoring ourselves and honoring others.
And it's about creating a world where everyone can thrive.
I love that. Okay, so what are some other laws of Ma'at that relate to the age of mentality?
Well, there are several. I have not told lies speaks directly to Head's emphasis on truth and authenticity.
Right, because truth is so foundational
It's the bedrock of everything.
to this new way of being.
Absolutely. And another law is I have not closed my ears to the truth,
Okay.
which encourages open-mindedness and a willingness to consider different perspectives.
So it's about being willing to challenge our own beliefs,
Yeah,
and to be open to new information.
right. And to recognize that we don't have all the answers.
Absolutely, and that ties into this idea of intellectual humility,
Yeah,
which is so important in this age of information overload.
right. Because we're constantly being bombarded with information.
We are.
From all sides.
And it can be hard to know what to believe.
Yeah,
So it's about developing that discernment,
right.
that ability to sift through the noise
Mm.
and find the truth.
And to be willing to change our minds
Yeah.
when presented with new evidence.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
what's another law that stands out to you?
Well, I have not cursed anyone in thought, word, or deed. Emphasizes the power of our thoughts and intentions.
Oh, wow. That's a really powerful one.
Yeah, because it suggests that our thoughts have a real impact on the world around us.
So it's not just about what we do, but also about what we think.
Exactly. And I think this is something that a lot of people are starting to wake up to.
I think so too.
You know, there's this growing awareness of the power of our minds.
Yeah, and the interconnectedness of everything.
Right.
You know, this idea that we're all part of this web of life.
And that our thoughts and actions have a ripple effect.
Exactly. And so if we want to create a more positive world,
Yeah.
we need to start by cultivating more positive thoughts.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most challenging aspects of this age of mentality.
Why is that?
Because it requires us to really take responsibility for our thoughts.
Mhm.
You know, we can't just blame our circumstances or other people for our negative thoughts.
We have to own them.
We do.
And that can be really uncomfortable
Yeah, it can be, but it's also incredibly empowering.
because it means that we have the power to change them.
Exactly.
We're not victims of our thoughts. We're the creators of them.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It's like we're being given this incredible gift,
Yeah.
the gift of conscious creation.
And the gift of free will.
Absolutely. So how do we cultivate that awareness of our thoughts and start to shift them in a more positive direction?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques and practices that can help, and we'll be exploring some of those in more detail in later episodes.
Okay, great.
But one of the simplest and most effective things we can do is to start paying attention to our thoughts.
So it's about becoming more mindful
Exactly.
of our thought patterns.
Right, and noticing the kinds of thoughts that we're habitually thinking.
And then from that place of awareness, we can start to challenge those thoughts
Yeah.
and choose to think different thoughts.
And it's not about suppressing negative thoughts or pretending that they don't exist.
Right.
It's about acknowledging them,
Mhm.
accepting them.
And then choosing to focus on something more positive.
Exactly, and I think that's where the alchemy comes in.
Yeah.
It's about transforming that negativity into something positive.
So it's like we're alchemists of our own minds.
We are.
And we have the power to create the reality we want to experience.
I love that, and I think it's so important to remember that this is a process.
It is.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
It takes time and effort.
And patience.
Yes.
And self-compassion.
Absolutely, because we're all going to make mistakes along the way.
We-
We're all going to have moments where we fall back into old patterns of thinking.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
It's part of the process.
It is.
And the key is to just keep practicing. Keep coming back to that awareness.
Yeah.
Keep choosing those positive thoughts.
And to remember that we're not alone in this journey.
We're not.
There are so many people who are waking up to this truth
Mm.
and who are committed to creating a more positive world.
And we can connect with those people.
We
We
will.
can support each other.
And we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that's what's so exciting about this age of mentality.
Yeah.
It's not just about individual transformation. It's about collective transformation.
Right. It's about creating a world that works for everyone.
Oh, and that's a vision worth striving for.
I agree. So let's get back to those practical steps that Head outlines for converting negative energy.
Okay, ready.
The first step, as we mentioned earlier, is trespass against no one.
Right.
And this is really about taking ownership of our actions and how they contribute to our circumstances.
So instead of playing the victim, we empower ourselves by acknowledging our role and then focusing on what we can change.
Exactly. It's about moving from a place of blame to a place of responsibility.
And that naturally leads to the next step, reframing negativity,
Yeah.
which we touched on before, but I'd love to hear more about how to actually do that.
Well, it's about shifting our perspective, looking for the opportunity for growth or learning within a challenging experience.
So it doesn't mean ignoring the negative aspects,
Right.
but rather choosing to focus on what we can gain from the situation.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, what can I learn from this?
Okay?
How can I grow from this experience?
So instead of saying, this is terrible, why is this happening to me?
Right.
We ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this experience?
Exactly. It's a subtle shift in mindset, but it can have a profound impact on how we experience life's ups and downs.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like this ties into the next step, checking our interpretations.
Yes, Head talks about how often we misinterpret situations or assume malicious intent when it might not be there.
Right, we jump to conclusions.
We do.
We make assumptions.
And those assumptions often lead to negative emotions.
So before we spiral into negativity, it's crucial to check our assumptions
Yes.
and make sure we're not overreacting.
Right. And it's about asking ourselves, is this really about me?
Okay.
Or is it something the other person is going through? Am I taking this personally when I shouldn't be?
That's a really good question to ask ourselves.
It is, because so often we personalize things
We do.
that aren't actually about us.
And that just creates more suffering.
Exactly. So checking our interpretations is about discerning between real harm and simple annoyance.
Right.
Not everything deserves our energy.
That reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, choosing our battles wisely.
Yes, and that goes hand in hand with the next step being objective.
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in our emotions
It is.
and personalize everything. But Head encourages us to step back
Okay.
and look at the situation from a more neutral perspective.
So instead of saying, they did this to hurt me,
Right.
we try to understand the situation from their perspective as well.
Exactly. And this can be really challenging,
It can.
especially when we're feeling hurt or angry.
Yeah,
But it's so important to try to see the bigger picture.
absolutely. And it doesn't mean condoning bad behavior.
No, not at all.
It's just about understanding where the other person is coming from.
Right. And that understanding can often diffuse anger and resentment.
Yeah. And could open up the possibility for compassion.
Absolutely. Because when we can see things from another person's perspective, it's harder to judge them.
It is. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. So these steps all seem interconnected, building on each other. It's like a process of gradually shifting our mindset and habits to become more resilient, responsible, and ultimately more positive.
It's like we're building a toolkit for emotional alchemy.
I love that.
Yeah. And Head suggests incorporating physical exercise into the process as well.
Physical exercise.
Yes. He specifically mentions isometric exercises, like holding certain poses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he sees it as symbolic of holding space for transformation,
I like that.
combining physical effort with mental focus to convert negativity.
It's a really interesting connection between the physical and the mental.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how holistic this approach is. You know, it's not just about changing our thoughts, it's about creating a supportive environment for change in all aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that mind-body connection and recognizing how each part influences the other.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, it's about creating a lifestyle that supports positive transformation.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the bigger picture of the age of mentality.
That does.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, the power of our minds, and our ability to choose how we respond to life's challenges.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I'm already feeling inspired to start incorporating some of these techniques into my own life.
Me too. It's exciting to consider the possibilities that open up when we start consciously applying these principles of emotional alchemy.
It is, but I have to admit, I'm still a bit fuzzy on how this global network idea works. You know, it sounds intriguing, but how do we actually connect with these like-minded individuals?
That's a great question. And honestly, Head's blog post doesn't provide concrete answers.
Okay.
It seems to be more about an energetic connection,
Okay.
aligning our intentions with others who are also seeking truth and positive change.
So it's more about cultivating a certain mindset and way of being in the world rather than joining a specific group or organization.
That seems to be the implication.
Okay.
But perhaps that's a topic for another deep dive.
I like that idea. We could explore different ways people are connecting
Yeah.
and creating communities around these ideas of personal and collective transformation.
Absolutely. There's a whole world of possibilities out there waiting to be explored.
It really does feel like there's so much to explore with this whole age of mentality thing.
Yeah, it's a rich concept.
But you know, at the end of the day, I always want to make sure that our listeners can walk away with something tangible, something they can actually apply to their own lives.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What's the one thing you hope people will take away from this conversation about the age of mentality?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the age of mentality is not just a concept, it's a call to action.
Oh, okay. I like that.
It's an invitation to become more conscious, to step into our power, to evolve ourselves and the world around us.
It's like we're being asked to become alchemists of our own experience.
Exactly. We can take all the negativity, the pain, the challenges, and transform them into something positive, something beautiful, something that serves the greater good.
And by doing that, we create a ripple effect.
Yes, our transformation influences our families, our communities, even the world as a whole.
It's like we're all connected. We're all threads in this vast tapestry of life.
And our transformations weave into a collective awakening.
I love that.
This might sound a little out there, but when you think about the implications, it's profound, you know? What if we could shift our collective mindset from fear and scarcity to one of love and abundance?
Wow, imagine what we could accomplish.
It's a beautiful vision, and it feels more urgent than ever given the challenges we face as a global society.
You're right, we need a new way of being in the world.
We do one that prioritizes compassion, collaboration, and the well-being of all.
And the Age of Mentality offers a path toward that, a more conscious and compassionate and interconnected future. Will said, this has been such an inspiring conversation. I'm feeling so energized and hopeful about the possibilities that lie ahead.
Me too. It's exciting to think about what we can create together as we move into this new era.
To our listeners out there, we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas. Check out John Head's blog post and the other resources we've mentioned, and keep the conversation going.
And most importantly, start practicing these principles in your own life.
Yes, because the real magic happens when we take this knowledge and apply it to our everyday experiences.
So go out there and be the change you want to see in the world.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Age of Mentality.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep transforming, and keep shining your light.
Thanks for listening to The Age of Mentality. Convert negative energy into positive wherewithal. Have a good day.